I'm Haley Taylor, and you're listening to the Rough Draft Diaries. This week on the Rough Draft Diaries, we're meeting with Baldemar Velásquez. He's the co-founder and current president of the FLOC, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, commonly known as FLOC. It's a labor union that represents migrant farm workers in the Midwest. Now, FLOC was founded in Toledo. Its headquarters are still here. But that's not where our story begins. To best understand Baldemar and his organization, we'll have to start at the beginning, when Baldemar and his family were farm workers in Texas.
Back in the early 1950s, sugar beet tomato companies started to recruit many Mexican Americans from the Rio Grande Valley. That's where I was born, right on the Mexican border. And my family was recruited to come up to harvest tomatoes and work in the sugar beet fields. My first journeys to Ohio on the back end of flatbed trucks with wooden sideboards and canvas thrown over the top. 4 or 5 families crammed in the back of that truck. It took us 4 or 5 days to get here. So we came up here and lived in the migrant labor camps. One fall, we didn't make enough money to get back to pay the truck driver to take us back. So that was the way we got to Ohio.
Baldemar and his family never made it back to Texas. They got stuck in a cycle of debt. They would borrow money in the wintertime for food, then they would have to work off that debt in the summer, which left no money for food in the winter. This cycle continued for about 6 years. There was a silver lining, though. Because they stayed in one place, Baldemar was able to stay in school, which provided him with more than just an education.
We lived the first year in an abandoned farmhouse and moved the whole family into the kitchen in the winter because the only heat source was the stove. So that's the way we kept warm, and I started school then in first grade. I didn't know any English at that time, but I went to school every day anyway because it was warm in the schoolhouse and cold at home. By the into my second grade year, my third grade year, I started to understand enough English to know what the teachers were talking about. So that allowed me to start getting an education.
As Baldemar learned about the world around him, he noticed his world didn't change. In the spring, there were sugar beets. Then they moved to a migrant camp in Michigan to pick cherries, and then strawberries, but mostly cherries. Then back to sugar beets. Then in the summer, there's cucumbers, tomatoes, and potatoes. And then you're back into the school time, and the cycle continues. The work never stopped, but there was never enough money, and it wasn't hard for Baldemar to notice that something was wrong.
Yeah, by the time I was 12 years old, I already had it in my mind because there you experience all the abuses. It's hard, back-breaking work. But the thing that was the most revulsive to me as a young person is watching and hearing my mom get mistreated by verbal abuse by fieldmen and labor contractors. And the cheating of wages it happened from time to time to us. So you knew firsthand those experiences. And by the time I was 12 years old, I already wanted to do something about it.
Although Baldemar knew something needed to be done, it took time. First he finished school, and then he went off to Bluffton University. He had joined and studied the civil rights movement, all the while thinking of ways to organize the migrant workers.
Well, we started in 1967. I was already studying, analyzing how to organize the migrant workers. So in September of that year, we called our first meetings. My dad and his friends, my mom and her ring of comadres. She was very active in the Catholic Church in Putnam County. But we were friends and related to many of the migrant workers that came to the area. And we just called a big meeting in my dad's yard and in the old farmhouse that we lived in, and we declared that we would create the Farm Labor Organizing Committee.
FLOC started to grow slowly but surely. They set up offices in Texas, Florida, and even in Mexico. In 1978, they decided to adopt a new organizing strategy. That year, 2,000 FLOC members walked off their jobs at the Campbell's Soup Company in Ohio. Campbell's was unwilling to pay the higher prices FLOC set for its workers. This boycott lasted many years, but in February of 1986, FLOC and the Campbell's Company announced a bargaining agreement. Almost the same outcome came of the Mount Olive Pickle Company boycott. After 5 years of demonstrations, on September 16th of 2004, FLOC signed a bargaining agreement with Mount Olive Pickle Company and its growers. Although many battles had been won and FLOC were growing stronger and stronger, their success came at a price. They were not free from loss or from heartache.
Like the assassination of our staff person in Monterrey, Santiago Rafael Cruz, we were doing a campaign in Mexico to educate the workers there, and the recruiters hated us for this. We're taking away their game there, and they could have murdered Santiago in any street in Monterrey, but they decided to do it in our office to send us a message. We did a counter campaign. We raised money to renovate the office, and now it's the Santiago Rafael Cruz Justice Center. And there's so much opposition, there's so much power against us that at times it was dispiriting, but we had to rise above that, tell the people that regardless of that enormous opposition, that there was hope. Those were difficult times.
We've covered a lot of ground so far, and now may seem like an odd place to stop the story, but we're not done yet. The story continues next time on the Rough Draft Diaries, so make sure to tune in to find out where FLOC is now and how they're keeping hope alive in today's day and age. For now, I'm Haley Taylor, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Rough Draft Diaries.